Hello and welcome to Love from the Other Side. If you are on this video, perhaps you too are in need of hope. We bring you stories from around the world of people who have shared their near-death experiences. Today, we bring you the story of Karen Schaefer. She had a precognitive dream of her impending death. Later in her near-death experience, her pre-birth plan is changed for love in the most awesome way. As a teenager, Karen had several psychic experiences which would come to her in the form of dreams. As she grew older, as often happens, these experiences diminished, and they had almost completely disappeared from her life at the point when she became pregnant with her first child. As we had alluded to before, one psychic experience she had foretold of a horrible accident. Her vision came true, and it led her to her NDE. Here is that story. Shortly after his birth, I had the most horrific dream that I would be in a terrible car accident that would take my life. For months, I was terrified and was extremely cautious and on the lookout for that monster vehicle. By the time my son was 7 months old, I convinced myself that it was only a dream, nothing of what was to come. I had a brand new teaching position, a baby, a home, my husband to take care of. I had put too much energy into this thing. Then it happened. I left school right away that day and wanted to pick up my son from his grandmother and hurry back to the school to watch a baseball game. It was a picture-perfect way to spend the afternoon with my son. I was exiting the freeway with usual caution. I made a left-hand turn on a light that had been green for some time. This was my lucky day, I thought. Then, in an instant, I was gone. Immediately, I was in the most beautiful, serene place I had ever seen. My grandfather, another person with whom I had known in a previous life, and a guardian were ready to help me with the transition. They told me of the accident, showed me the site. It was my time to come home, they said. The overwhelming love and happiness of that place was so inviting. I could feel myself becoming lighter each moment. In a fit of fear and panic, I began crying. No, I couldn't be dead. What would happen to my son? He was 7 months old. He would never remember me. His father didn't even know how to take care of him. I didn't want him raised by his father's parents. No. This was not the time to go. They were wrong. In an embrace of love, they calmed me by showing me that my son, my entire family would be okay after my death. My mother could lean on my grandmother. It would take time, but she would heal. My husband, hurt, sad, and lonely, would also heal and eventually find love once again. Death is part of the lesson we are here to learn on earth, and my death was an important lesson for those involved in my life. I was shown my funeral, taught how to be near to those I loved, and told eventually I could communicate with those whose spirits were open. I could accept this. They would be fine. I was feeling lighter all the time. But wait, my son. I couldn't leave my son. Babies need their mommies. I needed to be his mommy. I couldn't let go. So much patience was shown to me, so much love. My guides explained that the feeling I was having were still a connection to my human side. Once my humanness wore off, I would feel light as air, utter happiness, and extreme love. Words do not do the feelings justice. They work to help me throw off my human weight. The feelings were so great, and they seemed to pull me in a stronger and stronger direction. Yet my connection to my son was so strong. We wandered in this beautiful place for what seemed like an eternity. We discussed my life. We discussed religion. We discussed secrets of the souls that as humans we must forget, lest we'd never be able to thrive on earth. All the while, I was in awe. Some things were just as I always dreamed an afterlife would be. Some I was just plain wrong, and I remember thinking, wow, where were my other loved ones? When could I see my other grandparents who had passed? In time, they were on a different realm. When my transition was complete, I could choose to go to other levels when I was ready. Every now and then, thoughts of my son would make me heavy once again. I couldn't bear the thought of him growing up without a mother. I was told others would be a mother for my son. First grandparents, and then they showed me Jake's life. He was the most beautiful boy, so happy, but with a touch of sadness that seemed to pierce his soul. This was his lesson to tackle. He knew coming into this life the main lesson he was to learn. It was meant to be. I saw a new mom for Jake when he was about 7 or 8, a beautiful woman, kind-hearted, who definitely cared for Jake and treated him well. But she was to have her own child with my widowed husband, and the love she showed for her own child was different and unequal to the love she showed for my child, her stepchild. This isn't what I dreamed for Jake. This couldn't be. I was happy for my husband. He was okay. He was happy. My son was a different story. Other lessons were learned in the constant, patient job of transitioning me to the other side. I had to let go. At times I became hysterical, and then moments later, I was calm and serene. I saw a girl who had been meant in Jake's place, but before conception, plans changed, and there was a need for Jake's spirit to take her place. There was much upheaval that Jake could help mend, and he did. At a time when I felt the closest to accepting my death, I experienced a resurge of sorrow and pain. Longing for my son, for my life. I couldn't let go of my human life. My guides tried their hardest. They never gave up. They never became discouraged. It's unbelievable the amount of patience and love they gave. Finally, my hysteria was calmed by a higher spirit who seemed to help envelop me in love. My guides were instructed to allow me to return. Despite their pleas to allow them more time, they were told that at this point, my spirit would not rest. It was best to let me return, to settle my spirit, learn further lessons. My pleading won my return for the time being. I understood before my descent that my friends and family had lessons that were being postponed, but they would have to learn the lessons at some point that my death taught. Arrangements were made for when, where, and how my spirit would return. What lessons were I to have enriched or acquire new? Some lessons learned in my arrival on the other side would have been forgotten, and it was not good for my soul to know when I was dying again, or else as a human, I would focus only on that, especially as time neared. The last things I remember were being taken back to the accident site. Just before my descent, I was told that when my children were older, it would be time to come home for good. I accepted it immediately. But then wait, what qualifies as older? Does it mean I only have a few years? Will they be teenagers? Will I live to see them marry and have their own children? This was a difficult aspect to deal with immediately after the accident. I had a life again with my son. I had to spend it right, for I had no idea how much longer I had left. I was told I was lucky to survive. A large utility truck ran a red light and hit the driver's side of my tiny compact car. Despite wearing a seatbelt, the doctors say I would not have survived it if it were not for the airbags to open, something that is not supposed to happen in a side impact. The first year after the accident was an attempt to live the best life I could, the happiest I could. I was suffering, however, from severe pain from a fractured shoulder bone, broken ribs, and 2 hip fractures. I was told the pain should disappear in 6 months to a year at worst. 3 years later, the pain has not gone away. The second year, however, seemed to be the worst. I became so suicidal. All I wanted to do was to return to this place. This life that was so awesome, so love-filled, so joyous. My son and later daughter were the only things that made me go on. I was here for them. Today, only 3 years later, I have accepted my return to earth. I long to return to my afterlife home and struggle to find peace and happiness until my time here comes to its final end. Well, that is our experience for today, friends. For me, that was a very emotional experience. I lost my mother when I was very young, and I have often thought about what allowed her to make that decision to go ahead and leave us. Maybe she didn't have a choice, and maybe she did, but the years following her death were quite hard. And it's experiences like these that give me perhaps some hope. Perhaps it gives me what I guess would best be called a possible understanding. The truth is, it's not for me to know at this time, and I'm sure that I have lessons to learn too, just as there were lessons for her son Jake to learn, and lessons for all of us. If you would like to read more about this experience, I will put a link in the description section of this video to a book by Kevin Williams titled Nothing Better Than Death, in which he details Karen's near-death experience. Until next time, thank you for spending your time with us, and God bless.